go? Ready to go?
Yeah.
All right. Welcome everybody. I'm Bill Strey from General Finishes. Thank you for joining us today. We gave Tom Monahan the day off today. He can't go to the Piggly Wiggly without getting stopped and get autographs. It's ridiculous. So he had to take a little bit of a break from the videos and gave me the reins this week. So thank you, Tom, for that. We'll get him back in a couple of weeks. Make sure before you get too far, next week set a date on your calendar. We're going to be doing a Facebook Live on how to properly apply paints and stains for DIYers. So we're going to be showing brushing, spraying, hand application. We're going to be getting into some good questions, I have a feeling. So make sure to set that. What day are we doing that next week? Is that a Thursday as well? So Thursday, same time, same place as what we're doing today, 1 o'clock. Be ready for us. So thank you for joining us, everybody. Please make sure to share that we are on and ask questions as well. Your feedback is really important to us today, and we need it so that we know what to do better and what to look out for on future Facebook Lives. So if there's questions, especially today we're going to be talking about how to paint kitchen cabinets white and furniture white. So anything specifically dealing with that is fantastic. This is not a Java Gel video. I'm sorry for all of you out there. I know we're going to get at least one question on it, but this is painting cabinets in wood white. So to get started here today, this is really a basic process as far as there's 3 things involved. We're going to do some prep, we're going to do some priming, and we're going to do some painting. So as far as the prep goes, we have a couple of different boards here to look at. So I have a raw wood and I have a pre-finished wood door. And obviously we use this for one of our Java Gel videos, but you get the concept here of a lot of people have these golden oak cabinets that might be 15, 20 years old, have a lot of grease and grime built up on them. I know if it's anything like my kitchen, they need to be cleaned before you're doing any painting. There are some paint companies out there that say, you know what, it's no prep, no prime, you just throw the paint on there and it's going to stick. If you're trying to paint over grease that's been on your cabinets for a couple of years, paint's not going to stick to that. There's no way it's going to happen. So we like to keep cleaning relatively simple. There are a lot of cleaning chemicals out there, Crud Cutter, Dawn. We like to keep it simple with denatured alcohol and water, which is what we have in this bottle. So again, denatured alcohol and water, it's a 50-50 blend. And then we also like to have something like these Scotch-Brite pads available. And the reason we like these is if you just spray on the denatured alcohol and water and you wipe it off just with a paper towel or with a towel, the problem is a lot of what you're trying to clean off, you're just going to end up smearing around. So you need something like, these are non-woven pads, these Scotch-Brite pads. You need something to get in there and really cut that grease and grime and hand oils and all of that off of there, okay? And this is the most important part of refinishing your cabinets, especially if you have older cabinets that have been in use for a while. And you can see how that's even taken off some of the stain that was put on when we did one of the last videos here. So there's nothing wrong with taking off a little bit of that finish. It's okay because we need to clean that off. But again, if you try and do that with a paper towel, you're just going to be smearing whatever's on there around and not removing all of the imperfections. So really, really critical, really, really important to do that. The beautiful thing about the mixture of denatured alcohol and water, and you can see all that's coming off of there, is this is going to evaporate and not leave any kind of residue behind. So products that are out there like Crud Cutter, for example, really good products. They do a really nice job. The challenge is if you leave any residue behind on there, that is a chemical, and if those chemicals have a negative reaction with paints, then there are all kinds of fun things that can happen that you don't want to happen. So if you do use those cleaners, use a wash of this denatured alcohol and water mixture and get all of the residue from those cleaners off of there. Really, really important to have a nice clean surface to work with, all right? So once we get that nice and clean, we let it dry. And then what we need, we have these flexible sanding pads here. And the beauty of these versus sandpaper is you can obviously bend these and they're not going to crack and break like sandpaper does, but it also spreads the pressure out when you press and sand down. So instead of having some spots where you get really, really aggressive or going over these corners with a regular piece of sandpaper, you can cut through it real easily. This is going to form to those contours and those edges much nicer. You can bend it and get into all those recessed areas real easily with this. So what we want to do is give everything a bit of a scuff, the entire surface. And the reason for that is if this surface is too smooth when we go to sand it, there's not going to be enough to grab onto for the paint. And what you can end up having is chipping later on, and we obviously don't want that. So give everything a really nice sand. All the sides, all the edges, even more thoroughly than what I'm doing now. And if there's anything that we would recommend spending twice as much time as what you think on, it's the prep work, it's the cleaning, it's the sanding. Now when it comes to getting the dust off of there, these are just dusting cloths. These are really nice microfiber cloths. We don't like using the sticky tack cloths. If we're trying to keep this surface clean and not put any kind of residue behind it, we don't want to use a sticky tack cloth and have that get back onto the wood. So just get some sort of a dusting cloth and get all that, that dust and whatever's left on there off. All right. So as far as an existing finish, that's the prep that you want to do. You want to clean it, you want to scuff it. When it comes to raw wood, a little bit simpler process. So for raw wood, what a lot of people do, and the biggest mistake is they try and sand the wood too smooth. And again, the issue with that is we need something for that paint to grab onto. So you can sand it with 120, 150, 180. Don't go any finer than these 220 sanding pads. Even in the 180, 220 range is good to stop with. And these are 220 sanding pads again. So some people think, you know what, I want this very, very smooth, so I'm going to sand with 4, 6, 800 grit paper, and that's going to help me paint, and really it doesn't. What it does is seals off that surface and allows less paint to soak in. And we do need that paint to soak in a little bit and grab onto to the wood. So again, for the best adhesion, don't sand too smooth. Make sure you have a nice clean surface. Stop in that 180 to 220 range. Okay. So we've got all of our pieces prepped. We're ready to go. Now we need to talk a little bit about priming. And priming is a really critical step to this process, especially when we're talking about white. The reason being, there's a thing called bleed through that we need to worry about, okay? And I'm gonna give you a couple of really good examples of what bleed through can look like. So if you're going over a red stain, for example, and you try and paint it, this is kind of what you're gonna end up with if you just try and paint white paint over a red stain. It's just gonna come right through that paint. This is our stain blocking primer. This is a water-based primer, and we have formulated this to block almost any stain out there. Everything we've thrown at it so far, it has blocked. And red dye is one of the worst offenders when it comes to bleed through. And you can see just how well this works with 2 coats. Okay, so most critical part of this and keeping things white, make sure you prime properly. And our stain blocker is the way to do it. Here's another example of what you might see with stain blocker and without stain blocker. And obviously you can see the difference there. Now, a lot of you are saying, okay, I don't have red cabinets, that doesn't really apply to me. And you might be right. So maybe your cabinets look more like this does, okay? So this is a typical golden oak cabinet. And what we've done here is when we test products, we test them against our competition. And we have our stain blocker here, and we did this entire strip with stain blocker. We did this entire strip with our white undercoat, and I'll explain what white undercoat is in a second. Then we used competitors' primers here. And you can see I crossed them out. I'm not going to name the competitors, so please don't ask. But they're all high-end water-based primers, and they all have some sort of stain blocking capability. And you can see as you get further and further over here, this is a really good example of what we would call tannin bleed, where basically the grain from that oak is coming through that primer. And what's going to happen is when you then paint it, we painted this strip here with Snow White milk paint. It covers it up a little bit more in some spots, but it's still coming through in some others. Now on this top, after we did a primer and a milk paint, we applied our high performance, okay? And you can see, first of all, we're going to talk about some discoloration, some yellowing when it comes to clears. Hold off on questions for that for right now, but you can also see just how aggressive that tannin pull comes through with that clear on it. So the only one that stopped that from happening was our stain blocking primer. And that's a really, really critical step. So if you're concerned, especially on something like oak or on wood that you're concerned that that color might come through, you want to use the stain blocking primer. Now, if you're working on wood that maybe is a little bit more consistent and you're not as worried about tan and bleed, we do have another option for you. So for example, on that raw piece of wood that I had earlier, so if I'm working on this raw maple, our white undercoat is a really good option for that, where there's not a huge risk of tan and bleed and different colors coming through. It's more of a physical barrier instead of a chemical barrier. Okay, so we have two options. We have white undercoat, which is going to be the physical barrier, really good for professionals and contractors. Anybody that's a DIYer, we're going to highly recommend using our stain blocking primer. Again, water-based, fantastic to work with. So, as far as priming goes, we've got an example of a couple of ways to do primer here. So this is a really good example of a really bad priming job. And the reason I show this is because just saying I did a couple of coats of primer may not be good enough. What we're looking for is really to cover that surface. So this entire surface looked like this after one coat of primer. Obviously not a very good paint job, first of all, but second of all, there's not enough product on. This bottom half right here has a nice coat of stain blocker over the top of it. And you can see just how different that looks and how much better as far as coverage we got to get closer to that white. So that's more of what we're looking for there. So we recommend 2 coats of stain blocker, but it's not enough to just say, you know what, I'm gonna put on 2 crappy coats of stain blocker like this and it's going to work. What we need are 2 well done coats to cover that wood and make sure that nothing comes through. And you also want to get that nice white color that's going to help with getting that white color sooner when you paint. All right? So we have our primer. We're done with that now, and actually we'll use this board again. So once we've got our primer, we have to make a choice of what paint to use. And there are a lot of paint choices out there. We have 3 lines in our brand that are really great options for painting cabinets white. So we have our white poly, our milk paint, and our brushable white enamel. So the white poly, which you see in the gallon here, is designed for contractors who are spraying on paint. So that is a professional product, excellent durability. It's not made to brush. So if you're looking to brush, that's where we get into the milk paint and the brushable white enamel. The milk paint is fantastic. It's interior, exterior rated. If you have low to medium wear surfaces that you're looking to paint white, the milk paint is a great option for you. If you have something that you need a little higher durability on, that's where the brushable white enamel comes in. All right, and that's what I have over on the side here. We've got some brushable white enamel, and this is our flat sheen. So we have 3 sheens in brushable white enamel. And what you're seeing over here is just our satin and semi-gloss. The flat is a relatively new sheen, and we've been stuck in line due to COVID-19 as far as getting a new point of purchase, but this is the flat right here. Okay, so we have flat, satin, and semi-gloss. Now we also need to make sure that as far as applicators, we're using the right applicators. So I have a lot of different applicators laid out here. Spraying is one option. Again, we're going to talk more about spraying next week. I'm going to be able to show you a little bit of brushing here. These are Worcester silver tip brushes that I have here. They're a personal favorite of mine. You can see I have a couple of different sizes here. These are the white bristle brush. We also have what's called a chalk paint brush. The roundness, and it's kind of got a rounded edge on top as well. This is really good if you have surfaces that are detailed or have more of a circular shape to them. For flat surfaces, something like these brushes here do a fantastic job. I like the silver tip brush because it's a nice soft bristle. If you're trying to use something with a real firm bristle instead of a soft bristle, it's really hard to kind of feather it in and you're going to end up with more brush strokes. And we all want a beautiful finish in the end. I have a foam brush here just to let you all know that this is not ideal for painting with. It doesn't lay down enough product. It's really just kind of smearing it around. So we're going to take that and throw it off to the side. And with paint, we're going to recommend our bristle brushes here. Okay. I also have some rollers here. And you can see the different thickness of the roller there and how soft they are. So this is more of a short roller here, short nap. This is a really thick roller. And when you go to the store and buy these, there's all kinds of different options. What we're looking for is a woven roller so that it doesn't leave lint and fall apart when you're using it. I personally think the shorter rollers are going to be better for you. If you're using the long rollers, these are for semi-smooth surfaces. So if you want a semi-smooth cabinet, that's great. Then use these. If you want a smooth cabinet, use the shorter nap rollers. These are going to help get you a better finish. All right, these are going to work really well on large flat areas like the interiors of doors, or if you don't have something with this much contour and detail in it, the flat rollers are going to work really well here. Okay. So I've got my 2-inch brush, and as you can see, there's all kinds of different handles and whatnot. It's enough to make you go crazy and get you confused, and that's okay. Find something that you like. That's the biggest thing. And have a couple of different sizes, because if I'm trying to use a 2-inch brush on this edge here, as well as on the inside, I'm not going to have as much success as I might by using the 1-inch brush in these detailed areas, and then using the 2-inch brush on the large areas. Okay. So as far as application goes, and again, just like our primer, one of the tricks here is you need to get enough product down, get it down relatively quickly, and then let it do its thing. You don't want to overwork it, because the more you overwork it, you're going to be left with more brush strokes. So the concept here is to get it on, let it do its thing as far as flow and leveling goes. That's what this product is designed to do. Again, this is our brushable white enamel in the flat sheen that is designed for white cabinets. Now, a lot of people are used to working with wall paint. This is not wall paint, right? This is a much different formulation. Wall paints, a lot of times, to save costs, are made with a lot of fillers. And those fillers can help as far as opacity goes sometimes. And they can also, since you're working on drywall, help because it soaks into the drywall a little bit differently than working on a smooth surface like wood. We've designed this paint for durability, all right? Now, this also has very good hide, and you can see there, again, this is just 2 coats. This is 1 primer, 1 paint here. This is 2 primers and 1 paint here, and we've already got pretty good coverage on there, especially considering this is a really smooth surface, all right? But the idea, again, is not just to say, you know what, I'm putting 2 coats on and I'm done, because I could put 5 coats on and it might not be enough. If you're not putting enough paint on, that can be a problem. So you need to put enough paint on there so that it counts as a coat and not like a half a coat. Hope that makes sense. So when we get into the edges here, again, we want to get enough product on there. We don't want to try and spread it too thin. And these little details in here are an absolute pain in the butt to work through. So that's where having a nice brush and having decent touch helps out. All right. And again, if this soft bristle brush allows me to be a real light with my touch and feather in the product. And I'll have some brush strokes on there, but we know that they're going to flow and level out and leave us with a nice smooth finish. And as exciting as it would be to watch me paint this entire door right now, I think that gives you a pretty good idea of what we're looking for. And again, next week we're going to get into a lot more as far as application and the right way to brush and what to use and all of that fun stuff. That's a quick little primer for that. Okay, so we've got a nice coat on there. We're going to let that dry for a couple of hours, and then we're going to be able to recoat it. And that's going to be our final finish. That's the beauty of it, is this is a all-in-one cabinet white paint, designed for cabinetry furniture, designed for durability, all right? So, we've got some real good stuff going there, and I'm gonna try not to make a mess by setting this down. Now, if you're looking to roll out, again, same concept as what we were just talking about. This is 1 coat of brushable white enamel on raw wood. And again, I'm always going to recommend priming before you paint. It's going to help get that white color faster, but this gives you an idea of 1 coat and what it should look like. If you're not getting this kind of opacity with 1 coat, that kind of solid color, you're probably not putting enough paint on. Okay, so this is going to be our 2nd coat here. I'm going to try not to make too big of a mess. I'm using our short roller. Okay. And again, the concept is get enough paint on there. So if I was just to take that first application and try and spread it out, there's not enough paint on there to do what we need to do. All right. I'm going to try and spread this around, get a nice even coat. Now, this product is made to flow and level and give you an absolutely beautiful finish if you are brushing or rolling. However, if you're looking for the smoothest finish, we're always going to recommend spraying for the smoothest finish possible. So Part of that depends on what you are looking for as far as a project, as far as a final finish. So this is going to flow and level out, and you can see the kind of the stipple marks in there. But this is going to flow and level out on its own. So I don't want to overwork that again. I just want to let it do its thing. Okay, we know that a lot of that is going to evaporate off as water, and we know that it's also going to flow and level out on its own as it dries and as it stays wet actually right now. So we're just going to let that be and trust that it's going to be smooth in the end. Okay.
Bill, we have a quick question from Julie. She asked, did you sand before rolling the second coat?
You know what, I did that first coat this morning, so that paint was still very fresh, so I didn't. Never a bad idea to sand, but if that paint is still that fresh like that, I can get away with not sanding sometimes, just because that paint is still so porous. But if you wanted to get in there and sand it and smooth it out just a little bit, that's great. The challenge is if you get too aggressive with sanding, you're taking a lot of the paint off that you're trying to apply, so it can kind of be, you're fighting yourself if you're doing too much sanding. So light scuff is never a bad thing, but if it's a fresh coat that you just put down a couple hours ago, like I had done there, you can get right back on top of it and we know it's going to stick. Okay. So when we get to that point, and I know a lot of people want to do glazing on something like this, and glazing is a little bit of a unique topic when it comes to bright whites. The reason for that is we want to try and eliminate the possibility of using a clear when we're talking about bright white paint. Okay, and this I'm going to go back to our primer board from earlier and show why. So I told you I would talk about this. So again, we have our primer on the bottom here. We have our stain blocker, our white undercoat here. And you can see the white undercoat does a really nice job, but it's not designed to be a stain blocker. Okay, and our competitors on the bottom. We have all of our snow white milk paint on the second. And then over our milk paint on the top, we did our high performance. Now, the challenge with water-based clears is that sometimes they can have a slight amber cast. Nothing like what an oil base does. But over a bright white finish like this, you will notice every little change in color. And that is an industry-wide challenge. That's not just General Finishes. That is any product you will buy that says clear that is water-based. And if you don't believe me, Google any product that you're thinking of, going over white paint, and you're going to find that there are a lot of challenges with yellowing. And what you see here is effectively that clear can pull a lot of those imperfections right up to the surface. So you're getting hit twice. First of all, it's yellowing slightly, and then second of all, if you don't have a good primer, it's pulling those tannins right up to the surface and showing just all the imperfections and giving you a really nasty finish in the end. So that's why we don't recommend going with the clear. The challenge with that, as it relates back to glazing, is the fact that when you have a glaze, generally you want to clear over it. That's a bit of an issue for us. So if you're going with a bright white and you're looking to glaze in the details there and just get a real light glaze, what we would recommend is just getting in there maybe with a pen or a marker. You can buy empty pen glaze markers and you can kind of draw it in there in real detailed areas, and then you can leave it. Because how often are you getting in there and scrubbing those recessed areas when you're cleaning your cabinets? Now, if you're looking for a much dirtier glaze look over the entire piece, that's going to be a little bit different challenge. Again, you can leave the glaze and let it lock down and dry on its own, but be aware that as you get really aggressive and clean the cabinets over the years, some of that may come off. And as you know, clear coating, like we just talked about, you can get a little bit of color shift. So you really need to make a decision with bright white and glazing at that point on what your priorities are. And maybe if you're looking for that dirty glaze all over the entire piece, maybe an off-white would be a better decision for you, where if it does yellow just a little bit, it's not as big of a deal. So always a good idea to keep all of that in mind. All right. What other questions do we have coming in here today?
Laura asks, what if you are going over a wax chalk paint surface?
Oh, wax chalk paint. So the short answer is wax is going to be the enemy of going over, or going over wax is going to be a challenge. And we know that that's what chalk paints are made for, is waxing. The challenge is trying to get anything to stick to wax. It just doesn't work that well. So what you need to try and do is get that wax off with some sort of a solvent. Sometimes a chemical stripper would work. or some sort of a acetone, something like that, but you need to try and get that wax off of there completely. If any of it's left on there, just like trying to paint over wax, it can kind of chip right off, and you're going to run into issues, just like if you would paint over grease. So waxing is a commitment. Once you start to wax a project, it's really hard to go back the other way, which is why we like our milk paint that's going to be more durable than chalk paint and doesn't necessarily need that wax. So. Just to talk a little bit more about that stain blocker and some of the color differences between the stain blocker and the white enamel. These two boards, you can see there's not necessarily bleed through on these two boards, but I hope that it shows a little bit of the difference in the color between them, okay? So the board on the top there is going to be just a little brighter white than the board on the bottom. Reason being, again, the board on the top we used stain blocker on, the board on the bottom we used our white undercoat. Now they were the same white color to start with. So this is a pretty typical example of what you may see if you don't use a stain blocker. And you may not notice it. If you're in a kitchen and you have 20 of these cabinets and over the course of 3 or 4 years it turns gently, this doesn't have a top coat on it. This is just the white paint and what's in the wood kind of creeping into that paint and changing the color. Because these coatings are not static, all right? There's always, whatever's in the wood is always kind of seeping into it. And especially if I think a lot of the U.S. is about like us, where it's 98% humidity here, all of that humidity is going to kind of keep things going, and it transfers through that film. So the other thing, and I hope this shows up, is you can notice even in these recesses here on this inlay, that there's a little bit of a difference in how much bleed through happened there. And that's a really good example of tan and bleed, where each of these pieces on the edge that are glued in there have kind of turned a different color. So again, if you're looking to avoid that, that's where the stain blocking primer comes in. So it's not always a clear coat issue when people call us and talk about yellowing. Most of the time it's a primer issue. And that's why we have this system. We have our stain blocking primer, we have our brushable white enamel. That's going to be our go-to for the brightest white finish. Okay. And yes, we can tint the brushable white enamel. So through your local retailer, they can order it for you. We can custom tint to any kind of a light color, pastel color, if you'd like to utilize that. We don't have this available in dark colors. For dark colors, we would go back to our milk paint. And then for more durability, our high performance over the top of that. Okay.
Cheryl has a quick question.
Yes, Cheryl.
Any tips for application on a vertical surface like the cabinet frames?
Tips for application on a vertical surface. So, I mean, the best tip is that you do need to get enough product on, like what we did with that door over here. So I have enough product on it where it's getting a nice coating, but it's not dripping and running all over the place, you notice. So there is kind of that Goldilocks zone of getting enough paint on there, but not getting too much paint on there. So honestly, if I was doing a kitchen, what I would be looking at doing, some of you may find brushing therapeutic. I'm not in that book. I would much rather be a little bit more efficient. So if I'm doing an entire kitchen that has 40 doors or 20 doors and a bunch of drawer fronts, what contractors and professionals do is they come in and they actually take all of those off, and they'll spray those doors and drawer fronts, whether it's in the garage or they'll take them back to their shop. If as a DIYer, if you're looking to be most efficient, what I would do is take those off, and you can invest in something like this. And again, we're going to talk more about kind of introduction to spraying next week. This is just about a $70 to $100 unit right here. This is going to make your life so much easier if you have a large project. And that $70 to $100 you spend on this, even if you only use it for one project, is going to save you that much money and more in the time that you're saving. And you're going to get a better finish out of it. So as far as vertical surfaces goes, I hope I kind of explained that you just have to get the right amount of product on there. You don't want so much that it's dripping and running, but you do want enough on there to get good coverage. So a lot of times with the flat cases and frames that are left behind after the drawers and doors come off, these rollers do a really nice job with that. And then you can just have one of these brushes to kind of touch up in the corners and get the details out of there. So I think we even have a video of that showing a little bit of spraying and brushing cabinets. That's a quick 1.5 minute video to give you a good idea of how to do that. So, all right. Do we have any other questions coming in today?
Not yet.
We're in pretty good shape. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
I have one.
Yeah.
Christina asks, for an off-white or antique white, would you recommend tinting brushable white enamel or milk paint with top coat?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. You can do either one is the short answer, especially for an antique white. Our antique white, as you can see behind, maybe, no, we don't have milk paint down here. So if our antique white kind of has that yellowish cast to it already. So again, if you were to put a clear over it and it gets a little bit more yellow, are you gonna notice? Not really. But the brushable white enamel tinted to antique white is a fantastic option as well. That way you don't have to worry about clear coating. And it's going to be a great durable product for you. So really either way is fine. It comes down to personal preference on what you would like to do. And I think also comes down to if you want to glaze or not. So if you're looking to glaze, then I would go with the milk paint. If you're looking for just that antique white, you can go either way with it, whether it's the enamel or the milk paint with a clear over it for more durability. All right.
And then we have another question from Amanda.
Okay.
Can you talk about durability once cured versus MP/HPTC combo?
Sure. So the question relates to how durable is the brushable white enamel versus a milk paint and high performance top coat combination. And I think you're going to have to do a little bit of give and take here as far as exactly what you want. They're both going to be very, very durable. Okay. Now, anytime you have a clear over a surface, we have what's called marring. So marring would be if I took a key and if I went across this, and I'm not going to do it because I don't want to ruin my beautiful sample, but if you took a key and went across this, or a pot, and you left a mark that went across it. So a clear is going to be a little bit less susceptible to that, whereas something that is an enamel is going to be generally a bit more susceptible to it. So that's why with the bright white option, we really like this brushable white enamel. It resists marring exceptionally well. It does also resist water stains and chemical stains and all of that. So as far as durability goes, you're in good hands with either one. It's really, again, a matter of personal preference on what you want to do. So if somebody's doing a couple coats of primer and then a couple coats of paint, I think it's going to be easier if you're using the brushable white enamel to do that. You're going to have less steps. And if you have something with high durability and you wanted to do a top coat with milk paint, it's just another step to do, which is fine. Again, personal preference, but if it's me, I want to try and do less coats rather than more coats. So similar durability is the short answer. Slightly more durable when it comes to some of the marring and metal marking with the clear, but still very, very, very good with the brushable white enamel here.
We have another question from Michael. What's the sheen differences between the Enduro satin and BWE satin? Yeah, so our sheens in all of our lines match. So the flat in our white poly matches the flat in our brushable white enamel. Again, same with the satin, same with the semi-gloss. So they're always going to match, and again, same with our water-based clears. Our water-based clears have the same standard as far as sheens going across all of them, whether it's our high performance or even our EnduroVar, a little bit different product, or the clear poly or the Precat. Those sheens all match along all of those. With that being said, if I was going to do a kitchen or going to do a project, I don't want to get half a door done with one project and half a door done with another. You always want to make sure to use the same project for the most consistency. So they match, but always try and stick with the same product as much as possible. Then we have another question about sheen from Christina. She wants to know also what's the sheen difference between HPTC satin versus BWE with satin? Yeah, so they're going to be right in the same ballpark as far as sheen level goes, and you can always get a little bit different visualization and how it looks to your eye might look a little bit different, but as far as our testing goes, and we scientifically test those with a really expensive little tool to test sheen level, and they're going to be right in the same ballpark, right in that 30 sheen is the answer. So they do match very, very closely. And again, same with the flat. And as far as the sheen for the milk paint versus the brushable white enamel, the milk paint is going to be very close to the flat is the answer to that. So again, the flat and the brushable white enamel is definitely going to be more durable though. All right.
Okay. Any other questions? Go
All
ahead.
right. Well, and while we're getting ready to answer a couple more questions, I want to thank everybody for coming out today. Again, we've got another Facebook Live next week. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of application things and how to make life easier on you, applying to large surfaces, using pad applicators, brushes, what brush to use, all that fun stuff. I think it's going to be a fun one to hopefully get some questions and try and make life a little bit easier on you, because if you're using a good product and you're using the wrong way to apply it, that won't get you the results that you want. So we want to make sure to give you that information so that you're successful is the bottom line. And product is a big part of it. Applicator and what you're using is another big part of it. So again, our website full of videos. We keep releasing videos regularly that we shot last fall as we're finishing editing them. So keep on the lookout for those. Our FAQ section, we have GF University on our Facebook as well, where you can ask questions and find really good advice from professionals and also from ourselves here at General Finishes. So we appreciate you stopping in today. We'll look forward to seeing you next week, and everybody be safe.